The New Jersey Statehouse Watch is on. From Trenton, we explain what's happening inside the Statehouse, speaking directly with legislators, policymakers, and budget experts to bring you the facts behind the decisions.
There's no doubt that energy bills are about to skyrocket this summer.
$300 million to Newark billionaires? That ain't cutting it for rural New Jersey. Enough of it.
With your hosts, Jack Brangan and Constance Ditzel. So stick around. Here's Jack and Connie.
Well, hello. My name is Jack Brangan, and you are at New Jersey Statehouse Watch. And I'm here with Constance Ditzel.
Right.
Constance, how
Good
are you?
evening.
And
Started an hour later tonight.
Yeah, a little bit later. It's a long story, but we are here, and it is summertime.
I know.
You think it's really here?
I know. I'm wearing seersucker.
Well,
It's summertime.
I did get my Tommy Bahama shirts out.
Okay.
So that must be an indicator right there. But we're going to have a great show tonight, a very interesting show, and a little bit different than what we've been doing in the past. By the way, everything on the show is about New Jersey. We're not going to talk about anything going on in Washington unless it relates to New Jersey. You can always watch this podcast live or the past shows by going to NewJerseyStatehouseWatch.com. And everything is there with it live and how to get to the past shows. Also, any of the past shows you can download using Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. So any of those, there's a link on our website out to YouTube. So there's many different paths to our show or to the past shows. And so far, we have been focused on bills that have been going through the legislature. And, you know, there's plenty of bombshells going through the legislature in Trenton. And you really can't track them all, but you try to pick out the ones that will have the most impact on people. This is going to be a little bit different tonight. We have Chris Russell with us, and he is a political strategist. So we're going to talk about campaigns more than anything else. So why don't we start with set the tone here, because when you talk about campaigns, two things come to mind. Number one, we're in the general election now for an election in November. And of course, we just finished the gubernatorial, and we're into the Mikey Sherrill administration, for better or for worse. And let's take a look at the first clip here, Mr. Producer, and we'll.
Moments ago, I called and congratulated Mikey Sherrill and gave her my very best wishes. Gave her my very best wishes in hopefully solving New Jersey. And listen, guys, nobody is more disappointed than I am.
Well, that was a night. That was a night. We all remember that. Jack and I both ran for assembly, so we were running with him.
We had skin in the game.
We did have skin in the game, and we went on the diner tours, and we did a lot of different things. And we were very pumped up because we felt Jack had a really great platform. You can argue whether it was a great platform, but he was specific. He really laid out his plans. And I think voters appreciated that. So we were a little shocked at the the way it all turned out.
Yeah, I think there was sort of a miscalculation where our expectations were really way out of line from reality. Mm-hmm. And I think that was, if he had lost by, if it was a very close election, okay, you can sort of deal with it. But there was a miscalculation somewhere along the line. I do want to say, I think Jack did a good job, did a great job. And there are indicators, not just our opinion, but Jack ended up with 1.4 million votes. Now, that's a lot of votes, but if you compare it to the prior gubernatorial elections, he got more votes than any other Republican gubernatorial candidate back to 1969. Mm-hmm. So he did better than any other candidate, any other Republican gubernatorial candidate, back to 1969. In addition to that, the 1.4 million votes that he got was greater than any Democratic candidate back to 1969. Even Phil Murphy, with that number, he would have beaten Phil Murphy. The only person he didn't beat is Mikey Sherrill this year. So he did a good job. He got a lot of votes, not enough to win. There was a tremendous difference in the number of voters that voted this time around compared to the last Chitterelli Murphy. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And I think Chris is in the waiting room, in the green room.
We're going to talk to somebody close to this campaign. Chris Russell, we're going to interview tonight. We wanted to communicate with him because having done campaign ourselves, we could have used a lot more advice too. Yeah. So we're going to take this all as fresh wisdom from Chris. Chris is going to talk to us, and we're going to talk about generally about campaigns and strategy, and then specifically about the last election.
Okay, there he is.
There he is.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hey guys, good evening. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good.
Thank you for coming back from DC.
No, my pleasure. I really, you guys are doing a service here, so I'm hoping I can be a good guest and make it interesting for people.
Yeah, one thing that we discovered on our campaign, and with the show here, we've gotten to know multiple assembly people, and frankly, most of them just sort of run their own campaigns. It's I was talking with Vicki Flynn about campaign manager. She ran her own campaign with Jerry Scharfenberger. Not that much different than you and I, other than they're better at it, and had maybe been doing it longer. In our cases, we're brand new at this game, So, Chris, in your case, what campaigns? Give us a little bit of your background, how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, well, I tell people all the time, it wasn't necessarily a typical story. I wasn't a teenage Republican. I wasn't a college Republican. I didn't spend much time focused on that when I was in high school and college. I went to Temple University, as people who know the logo might see behind me. But I didn't get involved in politics until 1994. I was looking for what I was going to do next. I was graduating the next year. I kind of had I tell people my start to college was a lot more about the only P in my life then was party, not politics. And so I was not the best student to begin with, but as I kind of figured out like life is approaching fast here, I started taking it seriously. And I went to intern for my hometown congressman, who happens to still be the hometown congressman, Chris Smith. And I was in his office in Whiting, New Jersey, little small town kind of in Manchester Township. And it was a great opportunity to be there, but it was also the most boring internship you could possibly have. Right? I was sat in a district office that was, he was rarely, if ever, there. His staff was amazing and treated me like gold, but they realized that wasn't probably the right place for someone who was, 20 years old. And so I went to intern, free internship on the Hightayan for U.S. Senate campaign. A guy named Chuck Hightayan, who ran in 1994. And that's where I got bit by the bug of politics. I completely fell in love with the action, the unpredictability, just the energy of a campaign. And I got to go up and down the state, kind of following Chuck around, did whatever job they asked me to do, stayed late, got there early, didn't ask for pay. So the perfect employee for a campaign.
Right.
And that was kind of how I started. I ended up getting a job a day out of college with the guy who was my intern director at the state assembly Republican campaigns. From there, I worked with other consulting firms. I managed campaigns from the local, county, state, and congressional level. And then in 2009, I started my own business doing campaign consulting and direct mail. And kind of my first big break after that was I worked for John Runyon, who you guys would know, former Coffee Eagle. I met John for the first time before he was even retired. He had an interest in running. I was connected with him. He was still playing for the Chargers at that point. If you remember, he left the Eagles to
right.
They cut him. And when he came home, he dove right into a campaign, which we ended up knocking off an incumbent Democrat that year, John Adler. And that was kind of big break in politics, getting John elected, and since have gone on to work for, people both here in New Jersey, plenty of folks, and then across the country as well. And happy to walk through some of my clients, but I don't want to monopolize all of our time. But I've worked on races, won and lost big races here and across the country, mostly focused on these kinds of bluish or purplish districts that are tough to win, for anybody. But it's where I cut my teeth, and I still love the challenge of it.
So you stick with the GOP in general. You're
Yeah, you can't really play both sides of that fence. It's no one will trust you.
There was a time, but I don't think anymore. I'm going to ask you a typical interview question, but what would you say are some of the three mistakes, some of the top mistakes a campaign makes, and likewise some of the winning strategies?
Well, I would say one thing, Constance. I've always told people that, and I think this, you guys having run, you know this. I mean, I don't think there's a cookie cutter way to win a campaign or a guaranteed way to lose a campaign. I think every campaign is different. If you treat them like, hey, this worked in that campaign, so I'm going to just repeat it here and expect it to work, it may not. The district is different. The candidates are different. The issues are different. Right. But I would tell you, I think you have to have a candidate who's fully committed, right? Who's willing to put in the work, whether it's going to be for local office or statewide office. You have to be about something, right? The campaign has to be about something. So it's a message that people can feel compelled to follow or listen to. And I think people have to understand that you can't do it alone. You need to have grassroots support. You need to be able to raise money. You need to be able to have a campaign that is more than just you. I think campaigns that end up becoming movements are much more successful than ones that are tried to run by a one-man band or one-woman band. So I think that's the things you can do right. I think the thing you can do wrong is kind of flip side. I think you know it all, one, and not do your homework. Understand the district you're running in, understand what the issues are. Don't just get into this and think your pretty smile and your warm demeanor is going to win you the race. It's probably not. I think people have to look at these campaigns more as exercises in both public relations, but also the science of the campaign, and understand that each campaign, particularly in a place where you're not favored to win, you're going to have to figure out a way to convert people.
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging when you have a district that is partially suburbs, but also has an urban area.
Oh my gosh, my district was really,
there you go.
It was a perfect example of that because it included inner city Camden, it included the burbs of Camden County, and included Gloucester County, which has historically been true South Jersey. The historical farmland was down there, but it's a very different complexion of Camden County. And then you throw Camden in the mix. So really different.
I'll tell you, the one, and there's been more talk about it this year, given everything going on across the country and potentially going on here next year. But the Democrats in the state, they talk about us having an independent redistricting commission. Our political maps, both legislative and congressional, are completely gerrymandered, right, beyond recognition. If you look at the way the state, and that's what's led to these districts like you talk about, where communities of interest don't have any connection with each other. It doesn't make any sense. If you think about it, over the past 6 years, just use that time frame, Republican every year statewide, Democrats basically win about 55% of the vote. Republicans win about 46% of the vote. That's whether it's a statewide election, a presidential, state legislative, congressional. If you average them out, that's the number. So it's about a +8 or 9 Democratic state on paper by performance. Yet we have a congressional map that's 75-25 Democrat, and a state legislative map that is basically 65-35 Democrat. So tell me how that map reflects the state that we live in. I think, unfortunately, you guys are one of the people who fall into a situation where that district you guys ran in is drawn to elected Democrats. It's not drawn to even be competitive for Republicans. And,
right.
And the way they're drawn is because they will take suburban towns like that and then carve off a piece of a very Democratic area, put it together, and voila, you have a district you're going to lose by 15 or 20 points, no matter what you do. And I think it's really a disservice to the state in a lot of ways, because you get a very elected bodies that don't reflect the electorate, which is a big problem.
I think a lot of it is the mood of the voters. There's a lot going on in Jersey, and in many cases, I think the Democrats are sort of shooting themselves in the foot. What's going on at Delaney Hall can't be good for any party. It's certainly not winning voters there, I don't think. The taxes are not going down. The cost of living's not going down. So the affordability platform that Mikey ran on is not, we don't see any evidence of it yet. And I'm beginning to think that, when it's time for the election, which is 2 more Novembers, 2 more years in New Jersey, it's going to be the mood of the voters. If people are still struggling financially, if school districts are still closing schools, the school taxes are going up. If they're not seeing relief, the mood is going to be bad. And, what will happen, hopefully, we might see something like Ed Durr, who, on paper, it looked like he had no chance. And I think he used door knocking more than anything else and just worked his butt off and, won the voters over.
Yeah.
And,
Is door knocking still in this technology world? That was one of the things we struggled with, because with the Ring cameras and everything, and people just plain not answering the door anymore. The motto I was given was knocking on doors wins wars. Now, this is a very practical, basic technique, and you can spend an awful lot of time doing that. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a two-part answer to that. I know the doors win wars slogan and all that, and I think there's truth to that to a degree, but to expect 2 candidates or 1 candidate to go knock on every door in their district that matters and to speak to a voter is just not realistic, right? The doors win war stuff is really driven by this kind of growth in canvassing and people who are out there now, not paid door knockers. These are not like local volunteers knocking on doors who are talking to their neighbors. These are people imported from some other place to come in and be paid to knock on doors and to make voter contacts. So I think doors matter. And I think certainly a one-on-one conversation with the voter is a great way to get a vote. But it's also not realistic, I think, for particularly campaigns that don't have huge budgets or people who have jobs or families and things they can't dedicate every waking hour to the campaign. It's a lot to ask to knock on all the doors and make those contacts. So that's where it comes in. You need resources to communicate. And New Jersey is an extremely expensive state to do that, which puts a lot of pressure on, folks like you who ran and others. And I think the problem is, if you look at these districts, part of the reason why it becomes even more difficult is people who are looking to invest in campaigns say, well, if I look on paper here, more than 2/3 of these districts are drawn to be won by Democrats. So how do we overcome that? Do I want to invest in that, or do I want to take that money and take it to a more competitive state? And I think ultimately that, it's hard for a candidate without other means to raise the money, and to think that only door knocking is going to carry you to carry the day it's just not true. And I would argue, no knock on Ed Durr, but Ed Durr won largely because Jack Ciattarelli dominated that district in serious fashion. I mean, Jack won that district by a ton more votes than Ed Durr won it by. And so he had coattails, right? And Ed, God bless him, took advantage of those and pulled off probably the largest legislative race upset in the history of the state. However, it was driven by a kind of a statewide momentum that had been built in 2021 for Jack, which carried a bunch of other people over the line too. Unfortunately, we've given a lot of those seats back in the past.
Yeah, and there's that, and there's social media. Now, social media, I felt as an assembly person that was some way for people to get to know us. But honestly, I really don't think it made, this is just my opinion, I don't think it made that much difference for the governor, Jack Ciattarelli. I didn't feel like social media engagement was so necessary.
I think
maybe it depends on the position.
I think social media is helpful, but again, it's not, it can be a false positive or a false negative. Sometimes if you're looking at your engagement and response on social media, you're in many ways talking to an echo chamber, because the way the algorithms work on social media is they kind of make you talk to people who talk like you. And kind of
Right.
segregate you from people who don't talk like you. So there's a lot of not knowing, which I think to your side, I heard you on the open, Jack, talk about, being surprised on election day. And certainly I was too. I didn't know whether we would win in 25, but both our own polling, and then if you looked at, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Real Clear polling average, which is like an aggregation of all the public polls that are out there, right? And so if you look at New Jersey in 2025, if you took every public poll that was floating out there in New Jersey over the course of many, many months, it had Mike Sherrill plus 3.3 on election day, right? That was the average. So I think that was the expectation, right? The race would be a low single digit race, and it would go either way. So what turned out certainly was a surprise, but I think and a crushing disappointment, not just a surprise. But I think in terms of social media, you're right. It's a tool, just like door knocking, just like other things, but it's not the only thing. And I joke around all the time, social media, the idea that you can just get organic following on social media and have all these people flock to you. There's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire, right? Because it's not free. Right. If you want to get real reach on social media, you got to pay for it. And I think that's something most people also don't think about or understand. There's a paid aspect to it that is kind of unspoken, but is real.
Yeah. And then there's subliminal messaging and hard going at it. When in the campaign season, say, you have a November election, when do you really start up with the campaign? Yes. I know you're going to say you start as soon as the primary's over, but is there a period where it's rather subliminal and people just aren't paying attention anyway in the summer?
People are not thinking voting right now.
No, I think you're right. I think this kind of post-primary through probably July is a big malaise, right? Even through August to a degree. The problem is when I started, in politics, like election day was election day, and you had absentee ballots and a few other things that you had to focus on, but largely you were focused on a Labor Day start and a first Tuesday in November finish. Now you basically have election day is 6 weeks long, and it's every day for 6 weeks. And right around September 20th, give or take a day or two, mail-in ballots will go out, and then about 45 days later or 40 days later or so, you have early voting. So in terms of the way it used to be, you can't focus all your energy on the first Tuesday in November, which I think gives the problem we have, Jack, in that regard, and Constance, is if you wait too long, it's too late, right? You have to get out and communicate with these voters, because there are some people who, even to your door knocking is a great example of why you need organization around your door knocking. If you could knock on someone's door on September 25th and they could tell you, I voted already. Yeah. Right. So lists aren't updated and all that kind of stuff. So I think you have to look at the campaign. Even the voters aren't paying rapt attention to what's going on. The planning inside your campaign has to begin right after the primary, because you need to start communicating with people, whether it's subliminally, like you say, or a little more aggressively, in a way that they are aware of you by the time you get to mid-September. Because if you don't, you're behind the eight ball.
Yeah, what we did during our campaign, one technique we used, and Constance did this as well. All summer, we went to all the public events, the concerts, and in the towns within the county, there's concerts going on all the time, every week, on the weekends, all through the summer. And we would plant ourselves towards the exits. After the concerts, people are coming out en masse out to the parking lot. And we would have people handing out literature just to get our name, our face, in front of them, with the idea that 6 touch points finally gives you recognition, so that when people go into the voting booth, may have no idea, but just the name recognition, a lot of people will vote just on name recognition. And we did that all summer. And unfortunately, our team wasn't big enough to get all the events. Mm-hmm. But we went through close to 8,000 leaflets just in the summer, going to the concerts in Collingswood, Haddonfield, Cherry Hill, and handing things out. And frankly, even during that time, people would stop and talk to you. So when I compare that to door knocking, and you knock on a door and nobody shows up, or, everybody ducks for cover inside the house because somebody unannounced is at the door. we talked to a lot of people, on their way to the parking lot, and we handed out thousands of these things. So it's not the answer. Like you say, it's one tool in the shed,
It's one tool in the shed. I think that the challenge is when you go to public events like that, given how these districts are drawn in a lot of ways, you don't necessarily know whether that person is in your legislative district. You don't necessarily know, whether they're an active voter, what kind of voter they are. I mean, we're looking at a world right now where in almost any race you look at that's even remotely competitive, you're starting out with 85% of the people, 80% of the people already having made up their minds. But they don't need to know your name. They just need to know what letter comes after it. And so you have a situation where there's people who may be polite to you, which is great, at least there's still some human decency out there, but they have no intention of voting for you, even if they don't even know who you're running against. Are you Republican or Democrat? And that's their first, and in some cases only piece of information they want to have. So the downside of handing out public events like that is you don't know who you're talking to.
So you're wasting a lot.
But to your point, the downside of doors, where you know exactly who you want to talk to, they don't want to talk to you. So I mean, it cuts both ways.
We love the Numenar app. That was a great tool. Technology has changed your job, in at least in this. That was a great tool.
Yeah, the folks at Numenar, it's a really good app. And I think those apps continue to get better and better and better every year. And people become more and more comfortable with technology, right? It used to be almost like some people said, please don't ever give me an app. I'd rather take paper lists around. But I think now even people, I look at my parents, right? And they're in their mid 70s. They're very comfortable around a phone. They don't need to, it's not like scary to them that they can use it and operate it. So even people who 20 years ago, a 70-year-old would say, don't give me an app. What the hell is that? What's a phone? I don't want to touch that thing.
And we shouldn't assume our viewers even know what a Numenar app is. But basically, it's an application where the voters are broken down to Democrat, Republican, and within that, ranked 1 to 5. Whereas 1 is a strong Republican and 5 was the opposite. 5 is a weak Republican.
It depends it could do it either way, but you're right. The idea being you have, and listen, you can make it even richer than that, right? For Jack, and our data guy on the campaign was from the Trump team, and he was excellent in terms of, being able to model data and all that. But so data has become a great weapon in campaigns. It's expensive to get really good data, but you can know a lot about whose door you're about to knock on, or whose house you're about to deliver a piece of mail to. In some cases, a scary amount about them.
I was going to say, some of the information, it gets a little creepy. They know so much about you.
There is a creep factor, Jack, to it for sure.
Yeah.
Although I think what we had was basically just the names and who else was living in the household and what their affiliation was.
Yeah, which would be a basic voter file, right? In that sense, that's not. But listen, there's some people, I'll tell you, Constance, like there's people who they still don't understand that their voting information is a public record. I mean, you'll run into people who are shocked to know that I could tell them every election they voted in. And
they were kind of angry. How do you know about me? So this is just public record, and they didn't want to talk at all. I don't want to know anything about it, and they would close the door. They didn't realize that it's public knowledge.
They don't, and I think that's just a lack of civics education understanding. They don't understand that all that stuff is public information and it's readily available to anyone who wants to get it. It's the difference between not knowing exactly who they voted for, but you certainly know when they voted, and you know how they're registered, and you know all that. So I think that surprises people still to this day, which is, for people like us who are involved in politics, is kind of shocking.
Yeah. By the way, you're right. At these concerts, when people stopped and chatted with us, if I spoke to 10 people, 5 of them just wanted to know, are you a Democrat or Republican? Yep. And if I said Republican, most of them were polite. Not all of them were polite, but they would just walk right on.
You mean if they were Democrat?
If they were Democrat, yeah.
And then were people here from Philadelphia who can't vote anyway,
right?
But they came over to the great music.
Yeah.
So do we want to take a break soon? Where are we?
I think we're coming up on a break, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about the election, Jack Chittarelli, and maybe a little bit about our database, voter registration database, and things like that. So
stick around.
We'll be right back.
America's Pulse Network. The mainstream media is bought and paid for. The truth is twisted to fit their agenda. But America is waking up. Because podcasts are the future for trusted media. Welcome to the America's Pulse Network. It is a network built by patriots that upholds the Constitution. But America's Pulse Network stands for God, truth, and the America First movement. There is no corporate propaganda, no government spin, just real news, real talk, and real voices fighting for faith, freedom, and the future of this great nation with common sense. Here are some of America's Pulse Network podcasts. Alexandra Levine Live, hosted by Alexandra Levine. Jersey Shore Podcast, hosted by Damon Galdo. The Conservative Corner, hosted by Seth Eisenberg. The New Jersey Statehouse Watch, hosted by Jack Brangan and Constance Ditzel. APN's The Pulse is moderated by either Alexandra, Damon, Elena, or Seth. Also tune into America's Pulse Network on the following social media platforms: X, Rumble, Truth Social, Parler, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Join the revolution because the pulse of America beats for God and country. America's Pulse Network is for faith, family, freedom, and truth.
Okay, we are back.
Got another clip we went up that'll spark some conversation. Why don't you throw that up?
So the question is, would I ever consider eliminating the income tax in lieu of increasing sales tax? I just came back from Tennessee not too long ago. We were on a fundraising trip there, and Tennessee has no income tax. What Tennessee has is a 10% sales tax on everything, including food and clothing. The philosophy has always been in this state, we have like a 7% sales tax just to round off the numbers, but there's no sales tax on necessities of life, food and clothing. I will work with the New Jersey State Society CPAs. We're going to look at what other states do, and every option is on the table.
Well, this sparked a lot of conversation because when I would even just go to my Republican committees, they said, the Democrats are saying that, he just wants a 10% tax. We know that's not true, but we want to know what to say. We want to know where that came from. So what did you make of this strategy of theirs? And is there anything we could have done more or less with that?
Yeah, listen, it was certainly frustrating for the reasons you talk about. Jack, I think like you said earlier in the show, Jack did something a lot of politicians don't do, which is talk in detail about issues, and he was very well versed on the substance. Unfortunately, in today's world where, anything could be clipped down to 3, 4, 5 seconds and put on TV on endless loop or on digital or wherever, it opens you up to exactly what happened. We had a lot of discussion in the campaign about whether we needed to quote unquote respond to that. And when I say respond, we did a lot of response on in the media. We did a lot of response on social media. We did not do response on what I would call big television, right? Where it's costing the campaign roughly $1.5, $1.7 million a week to advertise on the big channels. We ultimately got outspent, and which is a crazy number, but to give you a frame of reference, between the outside groups on the Democratic side and the Sherrill campaign versus our campaign and the outside groups in support of us, we get outspent about 65 million to 50 million, thereabouts, right? That was the overall number. And so we knew we were at a disadvantage in terms of spending. So had we taken $3-4 million of our money and spent it on TV defending that or trying to explain to people what was said, we felt that it would even put us at a further disadvantage because one, then everything on TV would be talking about it. There would be no counter argument. The entire debate would be about did Jack Shirley want to raise the sales tax. I think that was a good thing for us, although we had a lot of fights internally about it, I can tell you. And I think, while we lost in the campaign, certainly I don't think that was the issue. There was a CNN did pretty extensive exit polling in the state after the election, or on election day, I should say. And when they asked people what their issues were that they voted on, taxes was the number one issue. It was about 35% of people said taxes was their number one issue. And Jack won those people by about 25 points, according to the exit poll. So I don't think we lost the campaign by any stretch on taxes. I think we actually won big on taxes. However, that certainly caused a lot of the conversations you were having were ones we were hearing. Whatever you were hearing, consider us hearing it times 1,000. And certainly something Jack was sensitive about too. So a lot of discussion went into that and what to do about it. We chose not to dive deeper down that hole. Some people probably would have done differently, and that's fine. But as I always tell people, politics is the greatest Monday morning quarterback sport in the world. When you're in the campaign, you have a finite budget. You have to make decisions every day and live with them, which is what we did. And people could criticize it or not. That's fine. That's part of the job. But I feel like we made the right decision not to go further down that rabbit hole. But certainly the clip and the use of it by the other side was certainly a problem. Even if it didn't damage us in terms of our standing with tax-driven voters, it certainly created a lot of consternation in other places in the campaign, and it was a tough call not to push back.
It really shows how dirty politics is, because that obviously that was not the discussion at all, but they took that 10 seconds and ran with it. The other.
I'll add one thing to that, Jack. I think one of the problems on that stuff is, and this goes for advertising in general now, or political campaigns in general, whatever you think of the media, and I have very dim views of the media in terms of where I believe they are in terms of their bias and everything else. With some exceptions, there are some good reporters out there still, but it's worse than it's ever been. What I will tell you though is, back in the day, there used to be a media that would at least serve as a referee, an arbiter of these fights. So if something like that came out back in the day when, say, people actually read the Star Ledger or the Philadelphia Inquirer or the Press of Atlantic City or the Asbury Park Press, there would have been coverage of the fact that the clip was taken out of context and not true, that everyone would have read. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So it's really on the campaigns and on word of mouth to have these debates, and that makes it much harder for a campaign. Just like you guys said, then you have to decide whether you're going to take your resources, stop playing offense, and go play defense on something. And that's a tough call when you have a capped race, which, as you know, in New Jersey, both our campaign and their campaign on the hard side, on the campaign side, we're part of the state matching funds program, which means you're limited to what you can spend. It's a lot of money, but every decision of what you spend means something else gets cut, right? So there's a struggle that has to go on, like almost any small business has to struggle.
Yeah. So the other thing that was sort of memorable in the campaign, maybe from a negative standpoint, is during the debate, the accusation by Mikey Sherrill about Jack responsible for the death of thousands of people with his documentation or whatever it was that he was. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter. The accusation was there on the night everybody was watching on the debate, and there was some catch up after that, some because I think he did put out some. He sued her for that.
Yeah, listen. When that happened, I kicked myself a little bit that Jack wasn't more prepared to deal with that attack. I didn't think she would go that far with it, right? I don't think we could have predicted she would have accused him of mass murder on a debate. And I think she screwed up, to be candid with you. I don't think that was part of the plan. I think she got frustrated and lashed out. But, his reaction was one, I think, of a very human reaction, which was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Right.
And there was an opportunity, I think, to hit her harder back in the debate, which, I think debates are hard. They move very quickly and you're kind of on it and off it. But I didn't think that inured well for her, that accusation, and they really didn't do much with it on TV. So I don't think they thought it had much legs either. And my guess is that while I was cringing a little bit when she said it, I think their people probably cringed a little bit when she said it, because it was one of those things that came out of left field in a way that, whether you liked Jack Chiarelli or didn't, to think he was guilty of that was a bit too far. And so I thought it was one of those kind of things that was interesting from a news perspective, because it made such news. And yes, we threatened the defamation suit and all that. But in terms of how it impacted the campaign, I don't know that it did, because it really never made its way onto the airwaves in any real way.
Right. So she never really had any solutions for anything in particular. I mean, Jack had a solution for everything, and most of his solutions seemed reasonable up and down. You know, he had a great vision for the state, how he wanted to rearrange the, some of the public utility or public organizations like New Jersey Transit, put that under the same umbrella with the Turnpike Commission. Really a lot of exciting things. It sounded like it would have really turned the state around. Is there anything, what happened? What do you think happened that a couple things that maybe we misread or didn't see coming?
So listen,
I think we just talked about our gotchas, but they're not.
Yeah, listen, a couple things. One, no one, Jack, in the clip you played, he said no one was more disappointed than him. I would consider myself a close second. It was certainly a crushing loss. We, a lot of time and effort over the course of not just 1 or 2 years, but 6 or so, leading into the 2021 campaign and through, all those intervening years into 25. A lot of people worked very hard. No one harder than Jack. No one cared more than Jack. And so for him not to win, I think I won't speak for anyone else. I'll speak for myself. Very much felt like we let him down or didn't do something we could have done differently. And there's a lot of soul searching afterwards, for sure. So any criticisms that we got, like no one was harder on me than me. I can assure you. But I would tell you, I think ultimately we thought the campaign could be. Our polling said early on, and so did public polling, people were dissatisfied with the direction of the state. People thought the state was too expensive. People thought the state was headed in the wrong direction. We ran a campaign, we thought, of change in the state and of someone who's putting forth ideas to make the state more affordable. Ultimately, we also wanted to drive Republican turnout, right? We had the Trump endorsement. We wanted to drive turnout because we looking back into 21, the place where we maybe fell short in 21 is that we, if we just had a little more money, a little more time, could have convinced a few more Republicans that the race was winnable, which I think the media really did a number on us in 21, making the suggestion that this was never a close race and bad public polling and all that. And what happened is we did turn out, Republican turnout was up about 18% from 21 to 25. Problem was Democratic turnout went up 40%. And in a state where you're outnumbered by, 860,000, we actually, believe it or not, Republicans turned out at a higher rate than Democrats did last year. The problem was in 2021, they turned out at about a 17% higher rate. And when I say higher rate, I mean the number of Republicans turned out versus the amount of Republicans, Democrats versus the amount of Democrats. Democrat turnout surged in 21, and I think ultimately we lost a numbers game. And independents also, or unaffiliated voters, who were very much the backbone of our near victory in 21 or close loss in 21, were more split in 25. So I've thought about every single decision, guys, about what we did and what we could have done differently. We know we had the best horse. We know we had the guy who worked harder, who was smarter, who was more prepared, who would have been a better leader of the state. I think we got swept up in something bigger than what we could control, and that was a turnout surge that we certainly didn't see coming to the degree it came, and a numbers game where, like you said earlier, Jack, in your lead, Jack Ciattarelli got 1.4 million votes. If you'd have told me on January 1st of 2025 that he was going to get 1.4 million votes, I would have told you we're going to win. So to not only lose, but lose the way we did, was certainly a terrible disappointment. And, but looking back, I don't know that any single decision we made, and I would have certainly changed some things for sure, but I don't think any single decision caused that result. I think it was something where people were voting in a national election and we were running a state one.
All right, so let's take a look at the surge that Mikey enjoyed. So it had to do with the number of voters, and Mr. Producer, why don't you put up the first headline here, because I think this has relevance today. The RNC has discovered non-citizens on the voter registration database. There's been an ongoing lawsuit against the state of New Jersey to turn over the voter rolls. So let's go to the next slide. And Damon, can that be made larger at all? I'm not. Yeah. Okay. So that's as big as it gets. There's a number at the top. I'll just maybe people at home can see it better. There's a column there called difference, right? And the numbers in in the column called difference, the number there represents what's the difference of the current election as compared to the last election in total number of votes cast. So at the very top, you can look up and down that column. You see a lot of 200,000s, some plus, some minus. So that means from election to election, on the subsequent election, there might be 200,000 more votes than the prior one. Now, if you go to the top, we see that Mikey had 700. Well, let me put it this way. There were 719,000 more voters that voted in this election than in the last election of Chitterelli and Murphy. So that is a huge jump. Up and down that list, you see 200,000 and less. For this one, the total number of people that voted, it's over 700,000 that came out of nowhere. So if we go to the next slide, Mr. Producer, we'll see where all those votes came from. And again, maybe the people at home can see it better. But in the left-hand column, we see that this is the top 11 cities for Mikey Sherrill, where she got her votes. Newark, New Jersey, she got the most. Jersey City after that. Patterson, East Orange, Montclair, Franklin Township. I'm embarrassed to say my hometown, Cherry Hill, came in number 7. West Orange, Union City, and Trenton. Now, if you look in the right-hand column, what cities ranked with the total number of the most illegal aliens in the state? Well, if you look at the first 3, they match right up where she got all of her votes. Newark, Jersey City, and Patterson. So that's 1 to 3. If you go down to number 4 is at the bottom in Elizabeth, and then Trenton, Union City. So there's an overlap here between where she got her votes and where all the illegal aliens are. So this can be remedied. See, when there's a huge surge like this of 719,000, and then at the same time, you see either small or moderate crowds that she draws, right? She's not drawing 1,000, 5,000 at her events. When she came to South Jersey, she got people out, but not that many. You start looking for, I don't want to say answers, and there might be a whole list of answers here. But that 719,000 for a woman that had no solution to anything in particular is hard to understand. That there wasn't that enthusiasm. There was not a tidal wave behind her, other than it may be, we vote blue no matter who. Maybe that's the driving force here, or the sheer number of Democrats. I don't know. But the problem is, if she was going to win statistically, she should have gotten 100,000, maybe 200,000 more, not 719,000. And one of the candidates for that reason might be this overlap of where did she get her votes and where are all the illegal aliens? Because in the past 8 years, let's say 4 years under Biden, New Jersey has ingested over 1 million illegal aliens. Not all of them are voters, but there's been, we think, 1 million. There could be more. There could be 1.5 million. We just don't know. And we also know that there is no real check against the systematic alien verification database about U.S. citizenship. New Jersey does not participate in that. They do not link into the U.S. Postal Service location database. They may push papers around, but this is not best practice for a major database. So they don't do the alien verification. They don't do the location database, and they don't do the master file death database connection with the Social Security Administration.
And what they do is allow, when you're signing up for your driver's license, you're automatically assigned as a voter. That's what they do. Yeah. And back in 2022, two assemblymen tried to put through a bill, A 1554, that would require the state of New Jersey to do an audit and bounce against the voter registrations versus non-citizens. They tried that in 2022. The bill was dropped dead. That was 4 years ago. Those same assemblymen are putting it through today. So there's an unwillingness even to, if it's fine, then why can't we see?
Yeah. So, I'm not saying this is the reason, but I'm saying this 719 thousand sticks out like a sore thumb, and there's a coincidence here that all the votes that she got maps pretty closely to the number of illegal aliens, and the voter registration database is being held tightly by the Democrats. They will not really release it, and as you know, there are lawsuits to get this database to do an analysis. And my position is you need to give this to a third party, an IBM, an Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, somebody that is a third party to take that database, run it against the alien database, the Social Security database, the location database, the death database, and give us a report back. Well, what were your findings? And whatever those findings are, you can disperse them to the county boards and let them start working on them. But if we find out that it's loaded with illegals and dead people and people that are living in Pennsylvania and Ohio, I don't think you can certify another election until you certify that database.
So
that's my position.
And I appreciate it. So I think a few things, and I'll give you my best reaction to all of it, because I think there's a few things that we should talk about. One, there's absolutely, it's not a guess, or it's not a hunch that there's fraud, right? There is. I mean, people have been convicted of voter fraud in New Jersey in the past 4 or 5 years in a few locations. The article you just pointed out with Fox News and what the RNC and NJGOP have uncovered is that there absolutely are a certain number of people who are illegally here in the country who are getting their way onto the voter rolls. I think a lot remains to be seen. I read the reports today. I understand from what the NJGOP says, they're only at the beginnings of their analysis of what it is. But right now, they've been able to identify, quote unquote, hundreds of cases where people were on the database illegally. I take this position. I think there's an issue with the voter rolls. I think they need to be purged. I think they need to be cleaned. I don't think we should be accepting votes 7 days after the election. I don't think we should not have I think we should have voter ID, so people feel a confidence level that people who are who they say they are when they come to the polls. I think there's a lot of things in our current voting approach in New Jersey which need fixing. I don't think that's why Jack Ciattarelli lost. I think there was a surge, like I said, in turnout, which frankly it was less than 60% of Democrats who turned out to vote. Right? This wasn't like 90% of Democrats who showed up to vote. It was a lot less than the year before, in 2024. But it was a lot more than had ever turned out in a gubernatorial election, to your point, right? So we had a higher turnout than we've ever had. They had a lot higher turnout than they've ever had. Unaffiliateds turned out at a higher rate than they ever had. And they didn't perform the way they normally do, which is to vote more decidedly Republican. So while I don't dispute the need for very, very comprehensive election reform, voter file cleanse, purging, making sure that we have the most accurate and up-to-date file possible before any election. So I think it should be done on a regular basis, candidly, not every once in a while. I think it should every time, and there's no reason why it can't be, right? I mean, this is not rocket science. But right now the Democrats have no incentive to do that because they control both houses of the legislature. They control the governor's office. That's working for them. And they're going to let Republicans stew in our juices over being angry about it. Only thing I caution people is if people want to, and I know you didn't say this, I'm not saying you did, Jack. What I don't want people to do though is say, well, listen, the only reason we're losing any elections here in New Jersey is because of illegal aliens voting. So therefore, if we just fix that problem, everything's going to be great. That's not the case, right? We need to do better on other levels too. So that's my only kind of caveat into that. We could spend 2 or 3 shows and going over numbers with you guys, and I could send you graphs out the wazoo that you can put up on the screen, and I would love to come back and walk through them with you, because I think there's a lot of stuff people should be educated about what did happen last year and what's happened the last 4 years. But the reality is we can do better in elections too. And in some cases, unfortunately right now, like I said, right now elections, even down to the county level, are being driven by national issues. And to the extent they're being driven by national issues in a state where we are outnumbered like we are, that's a bad scenario. Just like it's a bad scenario if you're a Democrat in Alabama. So I think in that sense, we need to find a message as Republicans in New Jersey. And I think there's a bunch of great legislators. There's too few of them now, but there's a bunch of great legislators, some of whom I'm happy to work with, who are doing a great job of kind of making noise and making things more difficult for the Democrats. But we as Republicans in New Jersey need to figure out how to, when you're outnumbered, you need to figure out how to come together, get behind a message, a consensus message, a consensus candidate, and try to your point, convince people to do something that they haven't done in the last few elections. And I think for us, if you go back to 21, Democrats were asleep and we almost pulled it off. And I actually, in many ways, I lose more sleep now about 21 than I do about 25, because I feel like 21 was in our grasp in a way, and it got away. Whereas 25 felt like it was out of our grasp a little bit after I kind of was able to internalize everything. But I think for us as a party, we need to look at last year and not just complain about it, but learn the lessons of it and try to do better. And like I said, it's an armchair quarterback game, big time, right? Monday morning quarterbacks. There's a lot of people out there, and that's why I give credit to you guys. You're not just sitting there throwing spitballs. You're doing the work and trying to educate people and talk to people, which we need a lot more of. We have too many spitball throwers and not enough people trying to do the work. So kudos to you for doing it.
That is a good wrap up, and we are going to have to wrap up. I think there's a lot of other things we had wanted to talk about, but I think it's really valuable what you've brought to our listeners. So we're going to have to say goodbye and wrap up our show. And
thank you so much. Like I said, we could talk about things over and over again. So anytime you need a pinch hit on a guest going forward, you know my number, and I really do thank you guys for having me on and giving me an opportunity, and thank you again for what you're doing for the party and for Republicans in New Jersey.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Bye now.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
No break.
Oh, we're going. Okay.
So I at least want to do 2 seconds. There was a final vote. There will be a final vote on a bill that we've been talking about here, this A2260, that it gives sweeping protections for medical providers over minor children in their care. And this has to do with gender dysphoria. It has to do with abortion, has to do with freedom of speech. It's a sweeping bill with restrictions for freedom of speech and yet protections for providers all the way down the line. This is coming up for a vote on Thursday. There's still time. If we have made some progress, there have been some changes made to the bill, but still it's looking dire. If you have, you should write your congressman, write your assembly person. It looks like there'll be a final roll call on Thursday. It's called S2260. We don't have time to get into it.
Right.
A2218. We really don't have time to dive into it, but you can find plenty of information on it. And, I just want to point out, you can always send us a comment on NewJerseyStatehousewatch.com. There is a feedback form in there. If you want to get on my mailing list so I can alert you of when things are going for a vote for certain bills, I'd love to have your email address. Be happy to add it.
Okay. Are we talking about next week?
I guess, yes, we are.
in front of a abortion clinic or a clinic that does transgender, if you're just across the street with a prayer group, you can be charged.
You can be charged, and yet go up to Delaney Hall and throw a few rocks and
That's
break a few windshields. It's okay. So there's that. There's the fact that human trafficking, wide open door for human trafficking, which is a bigger problem. We'll talk about in another show. A bigger problem than you realize.
So we have two great guests coming up here. Next one coming up on the 23rd, Audrey Lane from Garden State Initiative.
Yeah.
Audrey knows everything about the budget, and frankly, most things we talk about boils down to the budget, taxes, property taxes. Mike and Ganamort will be on the 28th of July. Mike is part of the Army in the Assembly, and that's why I call them, that are up fighting for all of us to try to save the state. He's into everything. I mean, the last thing I saw was the John Lewis bill. We really need to talk about that because that's going to have a major impact, change the way this voting is done. We're going to start looking like California and some of these other states with ranked choice voting. If that's what you want, that's what you voted for. So Mike knows a lot about that and other things as well. So that's the 23rd, the 28th. Anything else that we have going here?
I guess we should notice the clock is time to wrap up, much as I hate to. So we're going to say goodnight, and we're going to see you on July 14th?
June 23rd?
June 23rd.
That's right.
June 23rd.
With Audrey Lane.
June 23rd. Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the New Jersey Statehouse Watch. Join Jack Brangan and Constance Ditzel every second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 7:30 p.m. Watch the show live at njstatehousewatch.com or listen anytime. Download the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time on the New Jersey Statehouse Watch.